Investing in victory means playing the long game. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Wait a minute. Didn't Topaz say that?
1, 2.
Alright, what's the number one goal of any game company? Depending on who you ask, the answer may be different. A developer might say it's to create the best game they can, while on the other hand, a consumer might say that the company just wants to make as much money as possible, depending on how they feel about the game itself. If you're one of the 2 people left on the planet that still think any of these companies have goodwill, maybe you'd say it's a mix of both. Gacha games though? They're different, because they actually have 3 goals, all of which are connected, and all of which are of equal importance. Let's go in order here and talk about step 1. The first goal of a gacha game is to get you in the door. There's a variety of ways they can go about doing this, especially in the current post-Genshin gacha landscape. Some might try to just go at the basics and offer a really compelling story. Some might try to sell you unique gameplay or cool animations, and some might try to get your attention with lore. Others might go a different route and shower you with early game rewards, and this is what Hoyoverse does. When you look at any of the 3 current major Hoyo titles, the new player experience for them is amazing. No matter where you look, you're getting rewards thrown at you left and right from both the mail, the content offered, and different incentives to get you to keep playing. In Genshin, you have tons of regions to explore, hundreds of quests to do, thousands of achievements to collect, endgame to tackle, events to get caught up in, and so much more. While Honkai Star Rail is newer and technically has less overall content, it takes that early game generosity further by offering incentives for doing the content, for example by giving rewards to players like the guaranteed 5-star unit on the beginner warp and bonus rolls at specific account level thresholds. On top of that, old events are permanently available for you to complete at any time, and you can get most of the rewards from them. Zenless Zone Zero is even newer than Star Rail is, yet it still has multiple story chapters to clear, both easy and hard content to do, an absolutely massive amount of events, plus the same quality of life that HSR brought with the beginner banner and permanent events. In all 3 of these titles, there's hundreds upon hundreds of roles available, all right at your fingertips, just waiting for you to collect. You can get multiple of the highest rarity units from the free currency offered by these games. That is, assuming you're willing to put in the time to play through all of it, or, you could just get your account managers to do it for you. That's not even mentioning that both HSR and Genshin had selectors within the last year to pick a standard banner unit from. So, all that seems pretty generous, right? Why is the company's goal to just get you in the door, or in other words, what's the reason behind all the generosity? Well, if you remember, I said they actually have 3 goals that are all connected, and the why is the second goal that Hoyoverse has. Once you're in the door, what comes next? Well, it's getting you to stay. Like, imagine you're a newish player in a Hoyo game. You've gone through the story and the exploration content available, you've taken all the generous gifts that Hoyo gives you as you've been building out your account, and you're finally ready to take on the more difficult content the game has to offer. This is where you'd probably start looking at endgame and then seeing how you can clear it. Do you think you understand the game well enough to attempt it? Do you have the characters you think you need? Are they built well enough, and if so, how much of it can you get through? Well, once you have the answers to all that and just, start trying, you'll undoubtedly be able to clear some of it. That is, until you hit the wall. This is the wall that you'll reach at some point in every gacha you play, but especially so in Hoyoverse games. Your units won't be leveled high enough, or you didn't invest enough in your gear, or maybe you got the wrong characters and don't have what you need to make any progress. This is where the third goal that Hoyoverse has comes into play. By this point in your account's progress, you've most likely already invested enough time to clear the main content, and you've also probably started thinking about how to clear the more difficult stuff, so you've actually already fallen right into Hoyo's hands. See, their third goal is actually very simple, is to create a wall in the game or a threshold that you can't cross at the current moment in time, and then it's to figure out how to get you across that threshold. Or in short, gyat. Wait. The idea behind gyat is that Hoyo wants to get you to a point where you're willing to spend something. Like, if you can't clear the content that you want to clear, there's basically 3 roads in front of you. The first path is pretty simple. It takes you down the line where you stop playing the game, because after all, if you can't clear any content, then why would you bother? And obviously, Hoyo wants to avoid you taking that path at all costs. So, Hoyo adds incentives for players to actually want to clear the content, and they do it by offering a chunk of the rewards you get per patch for participating in it. For example, in the current 5.4 Genshin patch, a free-to-play player can get around 60 rolls for doing every single bit of content in the patch. Of those 60 rolls, 15 of them come from full clearing both of the endgames that are available. If 25% of your rolls come from clearing content, then you know that players have a very, very large incentive to actually attempt to do it. The thing to note with these endgame content rotations is that they follow a strict schedule. What this means is that in every patch there's essentially an allocated amount of pulls set for the story, events, and other stuff like that, whereas you'll always get roughly the same amount of pull currency from endgame content, assuming you can clear it. This means that the actual amount of pulls that you're intended to get in the 5.4 patch is 45 and not 60, which makes those extra 15 all the more important. After all, 45 pulls is just a little bit over half of what you need to hit soft pity on a 5-star. Very sneaky, Hoyo. So all that brings us to path 2, which is spending your time. If you can't clear now, well, just log in every day and do your dailies, spend your resin, do all the events, upgrade your gear, and do everything else that comes with these kinds of games. If you commit your life to the game, you'll certainly be able to clear in the future. Hoyo demands a significant amount of effort from you to get all the rewards that they dangle in front of you. The worst thing is that it feels like you barely have enough time to complete everything. In Genshin, events are too short. For example, the Lantern Rite celebrations only lasted for 2 weeks, and in ZZZ we get so many events that it can honestly kind of get a little overwhelming. I guess there's never a lot going on in HSR, but that's a whole different issue. Honestly, there's usually enough stuff going on that it feels like Hoyo would do anything to keep us from cheating on them with other games, except for actually treating their players well. And this brings us to path 3, where it gets even more insidious, because this is the route where you spend money. If you don't have enough gear or characters leveled to clear right now, well, there's this funny little button you can press to refresh your daily stamina and farm more. Don't have the right units to be able to clear, like maybe you're missing a support for your DPS or vice versa? Well, Hoyo's going to make absolutely sure that the wish button will be on your screen at all points during gameplay, and they'll also ensure that the shop button is available every single time you open the wish screen. You know, just in case, right? So you've gone down path 2 or 3 and now you're in. You've fallen for their trap and you're across the threshold of no return. You've invested your time or your money, so you should get something out of it, right? Well, unfortunately, you got hooked, line and sinker, and now you're in it for the long haul. You just don't realize it yet. At this point, all of your free resources are gone and dried up, apart from what they ever so generously give you each patch. But you can be damn sure that they'll make it seem like you're getting a whole lot more. One tactic that companies use to not only get players in the door, but also to increase potential earnings is by going hard on marketing. Sensor Tower reported that between Q2 of 2023 and Q1 of 2024, which coincidentally was the first year of Honkai Star's release, Hoyoverse invested nearly $300 million into digital marketing for their games, which was over a 487% jump compared to their previous year where they spent less than $100 million advertising Genshin and their previous titles. They advertised their games everywhere. They're on media sites like YouTube, Twitch, Bilibili, and so on. Like, if you're watching gaming related videos without an ad blocker, you can't go more than a few videos without seeing an ad for at least one of their games. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen the Natasha ad video at least once while browsing around, right?
I'm Natasha, an underworld doctor. Feeling sick?
There's also sponsored videos, streams, and events where they go out of their way to show new people the game and try to encourage them to play it themselves. Like ZZZ sponsored EVO, and even more crazy, HSR sponsored the broadcast of the Olympics on NBC. But it's not just digital marketing, because they also do a lot of events to try and build their community. For example, they host events like Hoyoverse, and they do annual streams for both regular patches as well as bigger events that are themed after the new region for patch cycle changes with their major games. On top of all of that, they do concerts, collabs, pop-up events. They're extremely active on various social media sites like Twitter and the like, and they show up at major events like Anime Expo, Anime NYC, Gamescom, the Game Awards, the Tokyo Game Show, and a ton of others. Outside of IRL marketing, another point that's very important to note here is that Hoyo markets the characters they release as content for their respective games. There's a reason that almost every time a new character is released, the ads for the game get updated to reflect that. They want you to always be seeing the new stuff because if it gets you excited to log in, then that's a +1 on their player retention count. Even if you're someone that stopped playing at some point, all it may take is one super hot character and then you're right back into their clutches again. FOMO comes into pretty big play here as well. Remember that every time a character's on banner and pullable, they're only there for a limited time. When they're gone, until whenever Hoyo decides it's time to pull them out of the basement again. This can result in the wait for a character being upwards of close to 2 years. Looking at you, Shenhe. Besides feeling like you've missed out, it basically means that you won't have a whole lot to do if you don't end up getting any characters in the patch you're playing, especially if there's no explorable content to hold you over. And all this does is further incentivize players to go for things that they might not necessarily want. This all allows Hoyo to actually take a pretty lazy approach to the actual content they release for their game, because if the character is the content, then what incentive does Hoyo have to actually create anything aside from that? I mean, hell, I know firsthand a few people that log into ZZZ on a daily basis just to walk around as their favorite character in that game. And Hoyo knows this. They heavily market their characters through different trailers and teasers, which just promotes the idea that you can get invested in the characters themselves rather than whatever content and story you have available to actually play with them. While there might not always be something exciting going on in the game, they'll always make it seem like there's something to get invested into surrounding the game. If it's not the current character, it's the next. If it's not one game, it's another. And this is all part of their trap. They want you to always be thinking about their games, because once you're in,
you're here forever.
So now you're in for the long haul. What next? Well, to explain, let me walk you through a scenario from my own life. It might seem unrelated, but just trust me. All the way back in 2014 when I built my first gaming computer, my friend and I decided to go with a Corsair power supply for it, and I've even still got the email of that. That power supply did end up having issues when I first got it, but not only did Corsair give me a replacement, they also gave me an upgrade to the 850i from the 750 that I previously had. And believe it or not, that upgraded power supply is still going strong in my current computer over 11 years later. So you might be wondering why I'm talking about old computers and power supplies. Well, it's because as a result of this scenario, I now recommend Corsair equipment as a whole to friends, to family, and others who I built PCs for in the past. As a result of the good interaction I had with Corsair customer support and the power supply that has lasted me over 11 years, I have some trust in their parts and some faith that their company will do right by me as a consumer. Whenever I buy PC parts now, I'm always on the lookout for Corsair parts first, because I developed a sense of loyalty over time towards their products before any others. How this relates to Hoyo is that every single thing Hoyo does is under the motive of them creating that same sense of loyalty. They want us as the players to think positively of them, and they do this through everything discussed so far. Being generous early on into our playthroughs, giving out freebies like standard banner characters, and the rare example of Dr. Ratio that HSR got are all examples of them trying to get you invested in them. And that's not even mentioning the asinine amount of marketing that they do so their products are always on your mind. The more positively you feel about them, the more likely you are to get interested whenever they do different things like events or launch new games like HSR and ZZZ. What this does is it brings you into their ecosystem. Just like how I use and recommend Corsair computer parts, someone that likes Hoyo games will be just as likely to do the same with Hoyo products. For example, a lot of people tried HSR simply because it was a Hoyoverse game. While Hoyo undoubtedly spent an absolute ton of money on marketing on top of building that loyalty from their older games like Genshin, there's no denying that a good chunk of the success the game had is from people that already wanted more from Hoyo. Something to keep in mind here though is that in comparison to my scenario with Corsair, the Hoyoverse ecosystem isn't all roses, because you have to look at the context surrounding it. Like, Corsair gaining a loyal customer by having good customer support isn't something particularly insidious. They just wanted me to think of them first when I bought computer parts going forward. On the other hand, Hoyo's goal isn't just to get you in the door, it's to keep you gambling and spending more and more and more every single time you play one of their games. Like, for example, if you buy merch of your favorite Genshin character at an event, is it a good product? Sure, the quality is probably really nice, and you wouldn't have gotten it if you didn't want it, right? But it only serves the purpose of getting you more invested into whatever character you bought that merch of, and therefore Hoyo as a whole. Whenever you see that merch at home, you'll always be reminded of where it comes from. So what happens the next time that character's on raid up in your favorite gacha game? Seeing that merch every single day would probably incentivize you to roll for more copies, or maybe you'll get their weapon if you don't already have it. After all, they're your favorite, right? Maybe you're not a merch person and you're just a hardcore gacha gamer, always on the lookout for the new hot game. If you're already playing Genshin and Hoyo releases the new hot game Honkai Star Rail, you're probably going to start playing that one too. Now, you're not only in the Genshin space, but the Star Rail one as well. There's more chances to find characters you like, more stories to get invested in, new generous content to play since the game has just started, and most importantly for Hoyo, more chances for you as the consumer to pull out your wallet and swipe just a little bit to get you started. So now we're at the part where I get to tell you why this is all a problem. You know, apart from the obvious point of saying it's a gacha, of course it's a problem. You might have read the title of this part of the video and been a little bit confused because the traditional way that saying goes is actually the opposite. With Hoyo games though, it's just not like that. See, something Hoyo's been doing for years now is always making it seem like the next thing is going to be better than what we have now, even when that isn't always the case. I mean, that's all the marketing that we've been talking about. To be at least a little bit fair here, they do actually have patches in their games where it seems like things are good. But something worth noting here is that those good things come with a cost. First, we can take a look at a specific example from one of their games, and the easiest one to bring up is Genshin. I don't know if you guys have ever looked at the pull tracker for Genshin, but there's 2 patterns in there related to specific times of the year. Did you notice it? If you didn't, it's the specific patches that offer a lot of rewards, with the following patches having a big drop off, and here's the points where that happens. Don't recognize anything special about those patches? Well, those are both the Chinese New Year patches as well as the anniversary patches. Both of these are meant to be a time where you get to celebrate, right? Like another year has passed and the game is still going strong. So us as players deserve to be showered with rewards and have a great time. To be fair to Hoyo, it generally is a great time. We get a lot of rewards as big events going on IRL and a ton of other things. But then the end of the patch happens. Now, going into the next patch, what are we greeted with? A hell of a lot less rewards. Seems weird, right? Well, not really if you think about it in terms of balancing. Hoyo's goal isn't actually to reward us at these times of the year, it's just to make it seem like they are. If we get anything extra, they'll be sure to withhold that from the next patch's rewards to keep the average the same. If we get 100 pulls on an anniversary patch and only 50 the next, then the average amount of pulls between the 2 patches is actually only 75. Doesn't seem too generous now, don't you think? Looking past just the rewards, we can look at the other things like quality of life and also the recently announced potential buffs for characters in HSR. These are things that Hoyo can do at any time, but they hold it above our heads like a cookie jar while saying, "No, not until I say you can have it." Even on the rare occasions that we do get those things, there's always something at play that makes it not as simple as it seems. Like for the buffing system in HSR, don't get me wrong, I can't help but be at least a little bit excited by the prospect of being able to use my old characters again. As per usual with Hoyo though, this all comes with a caveat of context. Every character released in that game is almost always guaranteed to be stronger than the last one is. So for example, if their character Blade gets buffed whenever they implement this system, it's only a matter of time before he becomes a dumpster tier character again as stronger and stronger characters are released after him. Unless they actually implement the system properly, this quality feature really isn't all that impressive. For more general quality of life stuff, it can take years to implement, and even if we do get it, it's always done with a Hoyoverse twist. I mean, how long have we been asking for gear loadouts in Hoyo games, only to get these awful auto-equip systems instead? How long have we been asking to farm stuff like talent books and weapon materials in Genshin, only for them to put out a survey asking us if that's something that we really want? Hell, even Wuthering Waves added loadouts recently. Talk about Genshin could never. These are tactics that Hoyo pulls across all of their games, from big events and anniversaries to quality of life, but it doesn't stop there, because they also do this when they release new games. Remember, they've built an ecosystem that we're all trapped in. So what this means is that not only do we get screwed by the things previously mentioned, we also get screwed whenever they want to launch their next title. And you could see this when both HSR and ZZZ released. HSR released on April 26th of 2023. What was going on in Genshin at the time, you might ask? Version 3.6, where they were running rerun banners. While reruns are nice, it's pretty undeniable to say that they don't sell super well, nor do they make the vast majority of the community super excited to log in and play. Apart from those reruns, we did actually have a small region release to explore, but not only was its entire purpose to put a bow on the Sumeru Desert exploration, but it was also the 3rd desert region released in a row, resulting in not that many people being actually super excited for it. In other words, it was basically a major filler patch where people were looking for something else to do. So what did Hoyoverse ever so generously offer for players to do instead? Play their new game, of course, Honkai Star Rail, a new and exciting space fantasy RPG where everything is new and fresh and exciting, rather than just stick to the same old desert that we've been exploring for the past 6 months. This then repeated in Honkai Star Rail when Hoyoverse's next game launched, Zenless Zone Zero. ZZZ released on July 4th of 2024. What was going on in HSR at the time? The end of 2.3, where there was absolutely nothing to do after you pulled Firefly and did a tiny bit of story. I remember that patch vividly, because for 4 weeks straight after finishing that story, the only thing I had to do in that game was log in, spend my daily stamina, and then Alt F4 the game. It says something when that patch had 5 events total, 2 of which were freebie rewards, and 2 of which were simply events, where you got double the amount of resources for spending your stamina. So since there was absolutely nothing going on in HSR, what could you do? Once again, Hoyo ever so generously swooped in and launched their new game, Zenless Zone Zero. Everything that Hoyoverse does has a cost. While it may seem like things are getting better, it usually ends up worse soon after, and that's the cost that we as the players of their games feel. Whether it's for rewards, simple quality of life features, or game releases, they always try to screw us in some way, and it's for one reason. Hoyoverse doesn't see us as anything more than a walking wallet.
What are you?
Alright, congrats. You've either made it this far in the video, or you just skipped directly to this section, so welcome in if you did that. Apologies if I get a bit heated in this section, but this is something important to me and also something that I'm just passionate about. Over the years, it's become obvious that Hoyo is only interested in their long con. Their goal isn't to create a good experience, it's just to make it feel like what we're getting is actually worth something. They go out of their way to get as many people as possible to play their games, and then structure the first few patches of them to secure us as loyal customers. After that point, they just want to keep us in a revolving door throughout their variety of games. If you don't have anything to do in one game, you can be sure the others will have stuff going on to spend your time and, more importantly, your money in. I mean, who needs real content when the next limited character can be shoved down our throat every other week across all their games? Like, everything I've talked about in this video is evidence that showcases Hoyo doesn't really give a shit about us, they're just interested in whatever they can get out of our pockets for the lowest possible amount of effort from them. And what that means is that whatever we get from them is basically just the leftover scraps off their dinner table. Hoyo knows that we're willing to overlook things like the missing quality of life, the lack of real content, and the insane amount of time it takes to fix any problems the games have if they stuff us full of rewards early on and try to essentially love bomb us whenever we get upset. By the time the excitement of a new game release wears off and all we've got is the leftover garbage, they can get away with doing the bare minimum, but by that point, their hope is that we're in way too deep to notice. Unfortunately for Hoyo, their con is very noticeable at this point. The small bits of quality of life and the generosity that they try to feed us just doesn't cut it anymore. The revolving door is getting old at this point. The lack of quality of life is getting old at this point. Our characters standing in a circle for 90% of the story in their games is getting old at this point. The complete and utter disregard for the community's wants and needs is especially getting old. And that's not even mentioning their blatant and prominent greed that is showcased across all of their games except for ZZZ for now. And I specify for now because the fun times that these games have are only temporary. It's a matter of time before their next game launches, and by that point, it'll be ZZZ on the chopping block. It is just such a shame that this company is using this awful business model and these terrible practices to make things worse and worse and worse as time goes on. Because if you look past the bullshit that Hoyo pulls to try to keep us invested in their games, there's actually some good stuff underneath. But it just doesn't matter when you have to look past the hundreds of problems that these games have just to see it. Like, I love these games. I have logged into Genshin every single day since that game launched. I did the same for HSR and ZZZ too. I've been a loyal player because for a long time, it felt worth it to me. But I just can't feel that way anymore with the current state of their games. Honestly, they never really did enough to deserve our loyalty to begin with, which is why it's so important that we both recognize and speak up about these terrible practices that Hoyo follows. If we don't advocate for these games and this company to be better, then all we'll have is whatever bait Hoyo dangles in front of us to keep us here. If we stay in their revolving door, it won't matter when players quit one of their games because they'll have the next piece of bait ready. From Genshin to HSR, from HSR to ZZZ, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me a third time, and I'll make an entire YouTube channel to complain about your company. As this video ends here, I just want to say thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. This video took a hell of a lot of work, so if you liked it, I'd greatly appreciate you dropping a sub and maybe giving my other videos a shot too.